Would Dan rather?
There was once a set of Siamese twins, one of whom sang songs while the other one would listen to them. This worked out okay, since technically they were two separate people. But such an arrangement, under different physical conditions, will not necessarily have such pleasing results. If you get my old driftola. Go to your room. First there was the first thought, and this gave rise to the second thought, which gave rise to the third one, and so on. And now there's no stopping them. That is, there's no stopping them past the first one. Geese set free will always follow the leader, and shooting any but him has no effect on the flock. A man stopped his car and asked a man by the side of the road how to get to the destination he had in mind. And the man replied that destinations of one's mind can never be reached, which is why those attempting such are always stopping to ask directions. You ever think how much mystics with their eyes open save on mystical instructions? One everyday man thought, there could be no better model than to mentally live the life of a warrior, ever alert. This he was thinking when he missed his footing and fell down the stairs. As entertaining as you may find this little episode, I wish I could tell you that irony, perceived, has value. But it does not. It is merely a concept to camouflage an absence of understanding. A man is either mentally present where he is, or he is not. And no amount or type of thinking has anything to do with it. Not unlike that super state of alertness. They're flying awful slow, aren't they? Somebody call the FAA. In their skull, where everyone else has their brain and consciousness, one man had a little cage with a rat in it. Served the same purpose, he discovered. And shortly after this story was read, the Lovers of Caged Rats Society wrote in to complain. But screw them. A man had a radio that picked up no stations he liked. He tried to turn it off, but couldn't. He couldn't believe that he couldn't turn it off, yet continued to find that he couldn't. What to do, what to do, what to do. One man kept accidentally shooting himself, but it only bothered him if he looked at the wound. One man kept accidentally shooting himself, but couldn't tell for sure if it was really accidental or not. One man kept accidentally shooting himself and decided to finally rectify the problem. But after extensive experimentation was surprised to find himself in the perplexing position of not being sure if he should approach it from the bullet's side or from his body's view of it. One man narrowed down all of his studies into a single question. What is it that connects all things but circumstances? And just who the hell came up with the idea anyway? End quote. There was once a band of Ipsy-Dixit monks who spent all of their time searching Holy Scriptures for occult messages they were convinced were represented by the letters that made up the words within the writings. Then one of them decided that if this be true, then there must be also secret meanings in numbers. So he moved the investigation from the 26 letters of the alphabet to the 10 single-digit whole numbers and begin drawing complex charts showing how often the number 9, for instance, shows up within a certain passage as compared to, say, the number 4. And in response to his new endeavor, his cohorts pronounce him to be wasting his time. And for once, they were right. Animals read signs from the entrails of men, but only from those from the neck down. Hey, they're not idiots. Eagles don't pay for swimming instructions. If confession is good for the soul, then having nothing to confess is even better. But better still is in realizing that it's all a crock of shit and there's nothing to confess to. This public service announcement was brought to you courtesy of the All Is Known Society and its subsidiary. The rest of it has all been your imagination foundation. To profess to being an unworthy sinner is also a claim to at least exist, which is all that's necessary for most. And I point out again that all the troubles began with thinking about yourself in the first place. Once that's begun, it makes no difference from then on what specifically you think about you. No, after that, it doesn't matter. So ask yourself, why step off on the wrong foot to begin with? All right, stop it. I confess. I do think about myself. God forgive me. We interrupt our normal broadcast for this late-breaking bulletin from the front lines of the present battlefield, in which our correspondent notes that based on conditions as they now stand, it appears to him that the final showdown may prove to be between the sounds that are made and the hearing of the sounds. Whew. News almost too hot to handle. We'll try and keep you right up to the moment on this ever-changing story. One guy's current ode to his efforts. Read, 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 man, am I close. Think, 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 boy, am I close. Read, 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 man, am I close. Think, 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 boy, am I close. Man, am I close or what? End of ode. Only one with the proper view of this sort of thing can feel somehow a bit sad over misplaced joy, especially his own, verging on idiocy. Accomplishment in the specialized mystical field is the ultimate in non-accomplishment. One creation myth says that shortly after man's brain created him, he caught that leftover neural section, who had named itself God, tossing trash out on the highway, and that man decided to punish him by making him try to live up to his self-assumed name. Let this be a lesson to all you less than naturally tidy nippers sitting by the windows with candy bar wrappers in your midst. Envy certain sticky things and the things to which they stick. Be advised that the books aren't yet closed on this matter, and in fact are never likely to be. One man's current favorite question. If all talk about it is useless, and all thought about it is useless, then what are we left with? He asked me to put the word favorite in the term favorite question in quotation marks. Guess he's hinting that he's not actually all that happy with it. Such was an idea in one man's head. If I could but wipe my maps clean, perhaps then I'd need no maps. Why, he thought, are all of the truly astounding ideas impossible ones? About this, he hoped he'd eventually be proven incorrect. And now the weather. As they were riding along, the parent called over their shoulder to the children in the back seat, "Don't stare at those directions till you make your eyes go blind," which is precisely what always happens to one's eyes after prolonged staring at directions. Not excluding those which direct one not to stare. And in the aftermath of this, only routine sleepy travelers would dare say, "Then what's a man to do?" As though the only possibilities are limited to either the directions or to your staring at them. Yeah, pretty neat excuse, huh? Neat enough for the mind, and that's for sure. And doesn't that give you another hint? Or else give you that same old hint yet again? For a long time, one man kept hearing it said, to no beneficial effect, that the secret is right under your nose. And finally began to realize that it was more a matter of ignoring the area right under your nose. And then the benefits began to appear. There was once a prison from which there was no escape, as long as you were talking or thinking. And one man asked himself, "What do you call a," and immediately interrupted to say, "Don't ask me that again." There was once a land under a curse which had all of its dictionaries melt and run together like a gigantic ocean of smooth, uniform, what would have been earlier known as peanut butter, but which now, due to circumstances, could only be non-verbally known as what was. What a shame. What a loss to those poor people. What is the thing that you cannot put your hands on, yet cannot quite turn it loose? Two stories. There was once a group of creatures from out in the universe who flew a spaceship into a man's mind. Next story. There was once a group of thoughts in a man's mind who flew a spaceship out into the universe. A viewer writes, "Sometimes you surprise me by not adding a moral to one of your stories. But then I stopped and thought, what difference does it make to me? Which in turn caused me to further wonder, does it actually make a difference to me, or does it simply seem to? Which then made me further question, for what reason did men come up with the concept of seems anyway?" I must say that thinking about the kinds of things you talk about can certainly lead to a lot of questions. And not only questions, the sorts of which I've never had before, but questions that even this instant, whose value eludes me. But wait, does there perchance, somewhere within these questions and confusion, lurk our missing moral? I believe I'll close out now, sincerely, etc. There was once a man on a journey that at times seemed sluggish, unmoving even. So he adopted a method of only thinking 3 particular words, saying them to himself actually, and they were, weak, stupid, lazy. Weak, stupid, lazy. Weak, stupid, lazy. This man's journey at times became extraordinary, and during those periods, the method I just described fell inactive. A bona fide traveler only shoots himself in the feet when they're not moving. And now, the weather. There was once a man who looked down at his unmoving feet and realized, these are not my feet. Sun coming up. One man's latest question to himself, what can you say after you've said there's nothing to say? And what can you think after you've seen there's nothing to think? And more than that, Why doesn't such questions stop me from asking them? You know, I think he's getting somewhere. The evidence necessary to prove anything amiss is the identification of something not indigenous to this universe. Lacking that, all beliefs and aberrations, the supernatural and injustice, are spurious. As he walked through the jungle, a man composed a rhyme to the rhythm of his steps. Oh, you can look at a tree, look at a bear, look at the tangles, or at a bare wall. Looking to the left, looking up and down, but thoughts make you wanna stare just at them. He began to sense his step, heartbeat, breathing, and thoughts in sync. Mechanical, automatic, and meaningless sync, as regards one of them. The waves forever lapping against the hull of a ship will cause vibrations which groggy boaters will interpret as their own internal circumstances. A man asked an oracle, how the hell can there be such a thing as internal circumstances? And the wise one replied, there the hell can't. How many times I got to tell you the hell that? When one man first heard the term futile striving, he thought, what redundancy. Later in life, when he heard the phrase used regarding the enlightening, he thought, what dangerous redundancy. What dangerous, foolish, meaningless redundancy. One man, had we been able to hear him, would have been heard to repeat over and over and over and over again to himself these words. Circumstances cannot change me. Not my body, you stupid oaf. Circumstances cannot change me. Not my body, you stupid oaf. Circumstances cannot change me. Not my body, you stupid oaf. A certain man decided that one way to fight the automatic sequential flow of thought consciousness would be to always say the opposite of what he actually meant. But suddenly he was confronted by a problem. Where to begin? For he obviously couldn't start there, or else his decision would never get executed. He mused. A tricky thing, consciousness entangled in thought. And now the weather. There was once a man who invented a gun that, when fired, would send a bullet racing down the barrel the wrong way. That is to say, racing toward itself. But he couldn't get a patent. He couldn't get a patent. For no one who looked at his plans could comprehend his intention. Well, they said they couldn't. Yes, fair and mild for a little while. Descriptions, the Tao, the depths of recognition. One man's colloquial ode. To hear him say, you can't talk about the way, can almost ruin a feller's day. But for you to realize with your own very eyes what this means can cheer you up considerable. At least he did say colloquial verse. Legend says that many years ago existed a school for advanced consciousness which had but one teaching, that a man should swallow his head. There was once a man who developed a process whereby you could turn your mouth inside out, but he could never get the patent office to seriously look at his plans. Well, at least they said they never looked at them. Once upon a time, a certain guide accidentally stumbled into a reality not his own and was immediately startled by the fact of how seriously creatures there took the idea of sanity. In fact, he was more than startled. He was amazed. But don't ask me why. A man asked a mystic, should I abandon all thoughts? And the mystic replied, which ones? All of them, the man said. Should I abandon all thoughts? Yes, but which one specifically, the mystic insisted. All of them, in turn, insisted the man. I know, said the mystic, but exactly which ones? There is no which, shouted the man, only an all. Yes, I hear you, said the mystic, but I must know precisely the thoughts you refer to. All of them, damn it, yelled the man. I'm asking about all of my damn it thoughts. All of them. And just as the man appeared ready to bust a gut over the matter, the mystic put a rabbit into his top hat, pulled his hand back out, and voila, nothing. It was empty. And as he held his blank palms open and out to the man suddenly smiled and in spite of himself said, yes, yes, but I must know specifically which thoughts you're referring to. And the bunny instantly had its enlightenment. And an obviously disgruntled viewer writes to say, I'm not even going to bother to write you about this one. How to unfailingly know the truth. Short version. Accept no views of others. A man with sufficient taste of those astounding states mused, what better description than an uninterrupted mind? An uninterrupted mind. And one guy noted, normally regularity counts for little, but here I'll make an exception. An uninterrupted mind, did he say? Dramatics. One man decided that a good name for the antithesis of the mystic way would be, what's the point? Then after additional time on the mystical way, he concluded that the two were not that far apart, especially as regarding the name he'd given the latter. When one man reached his own understanding, he said, outside the mind there is no enlightenment, and inside the mind there is none. God, I love it when things work out so neat. There is ultimately no such thing as slight distraction, an acceptable degree of you listening to you think about it. There's this one problem that can't be cured, but if you look dead at it, it can, for as long as you hold a look. After that, look out, it's back again. It requires a touch of magic to separate sound from the hearer, to strip the sight from the seer, and such be the art of the unruffled mind. And one man was pleased to note that he had progressed to the point of not being bothered that he could use conflicting, enlightening ideas. Outside of a little village, up on two mountaintops, were what were reputed to be some sort of mystical schools. One of them had daily lectures in which, as far back as anyone in the village, any visitor knew, every day, whole lifetime, someone had been delivering the same message at the school. Every day, 7 days a week, last 40, 50 years at least. Then on the adjoining hilltop was another school, held lectures, public, open to anyone, every day. There was knowledge of it for at least a similar period of time, but in this particular school, someone would deliver each day a different lecture than the day before. And upon hearing about this, a young chap down in the village asked the local wise man what was the difference between the two. And the wise man said, "What difference?" if the art, according to this news item, it requires a touch of magic to separate sound from the hearer, to strip the sight from the seer, and such be the art of the enlightened mind, unruffled mind. If that be the art of the mind in some condition, then consider the mind's ordinary condition. It takes ideas to be of different quality. It's no secret that the ordinary mind takes some ideas to be of better quality. It takes some ideas to be more exact, precise in what they purport to represent than other ideas. It is not within the bounds of ordinary sanity for anyone to question this. The question does not even arise. It's that everyone knows. Everyone knows that it being overtly stated that some ideas, or that all ideas, can differ, and most of them do differ in some, either small or not so small, degree of quality. As I said, having to do with their exactness, their precision, or even their usefulness. The mind can see nothing beyond that, and yet a man who has already some knowledge of his own, of what the mind is, realizes that that's not true, at least on a good day. He realizes that for all essential purposes, for all intents and purposes, for all operational purposes, all ideas, to someone who knows what the mind is, all ideas are of the same quality. All ideas are simply the same thing, and which on the surface if you recall, some of you have a decent memory, it was only about 3 days ago we held a vote here and we all voted that be true. So, that is, that be true, that's ridiculous, that can't be true. You remember that, don't you? You remember that, don't you? You voted. Well, you waited to see how I'd vote, and that was by acclamation. There was not a dissenting vote here in the House. If I come to think about it, none of you were here that night. But at any rate, it is simply beyond any debate. It is ridiculous. It cannot be true. It is just would be dismissed by the mind to say that all ideas are essentially the same. That for any purpose, for someone with an understanding of the mind, ideas are of the same quality. That is not any sort of idea that can be taught to any useful means. You can present it as a theory, or you can present it as an absolute fact, but it's not going to have any effect on anyone. You have to see it for yourself. And once you do, then the idea of there being conflicting ways to go about anything of value to someone attempting to do this, then the whole idea is irrelevant. Not in theory. That it means nothing what you use. And that was witnessed by one of the items tonight that said one man judged and was pleased by the kind of progress he had made when he realized that he was no longer bothered by him holding, in the sense of entertaining and using, of him being able to use, to entertain, just to himself, to hold conflicting, enlightening ideas. And I don't know whether you noticed, but in celebration of that man's being pleased, there were several news items tonight that were literally, verbally, in conflict with one another. They were presented as fact. I didn't do it blatantly enough to insult the high level of intelligence and sophistication of this audience, but I may not have done it blunt enough for you to hear it. But that's another story. There's no need for us to insult each other. A man who knows what he's doing does not need additional insults. They're not required. If they're required, it simply shows that you still lack any real walking around enlightening understanding. All right, for instance, you could say, or I could say, I could present as a working kind of discipline or a whole mystical method, a whole attempt a whole way for a man to affect a change in his consciousness, something that would lead to it if pursued faithfully and blah, 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 and you're wired up to do it and et cetera, and everything else being equal. One of them, you could say, is to hold an uninterrupted mind, is to hold your present mind. It would be the kind of thing, the all-encompassing, ever-present alertness of the warrior kind of approach. But you can just strip all that, the allegory. It is simply to hold an uninterrupted mind. It is to hold, just right now, it doesn't even matter what, but if right now you can feel, which all of you can, that, all right, here is my mind. Here I am conscious, here's my mind. You know, what else can you say? You can do it right now, here's my mind. And you're aware that you have said, here's my mind, and that you've got your mind, and if you do it that way, it's right then it's sort of not really doing anything, it's just you're momentarily there almost with all the traffic stopped. You're sort of in neutral. You say, all right, here's my mind. All right, call that your present mind. Doesn't matter what the hell it is. That's your present mind. Then a method, an absolute method, toward the end of such as this, is then once you have the present mind, once you just say, this is my present mind, is to hold it, is to have an uninterrupted mind. It's to start from here, whatever you can come up with. You go, all right, this is my mind right now. All right, take it and go with it. Don't juggle it. Don't let it shake around like Jell-O on a plate. Don't drop it. You know, anybody can drop it and pick it back up later. You can't drop it. It's got to be uninterrupted. And no matter what happens, no matter what you have to plan, what you have to think about, what questions you have to answer, no matter what else is required of you mentally, you have still got to do it within the framework of this present mind. It is literally like carrying your own head or carrying something on a plate, or holding something in your hand, and you've got to be aware of it continually. That is your present mind, whatever the hell it is. Doesn't matter what you got in your hand. It's just children think it matters. What you got in there? Is that some of the words from Buddha? Is that some of the words from... It doesn't matter. Your hand can be empty. It's only children that think, well, it's important what's in there. Yeah, right. It turns out instead of the bones of Jesus, it turns out it's a penny. A small pebble. So you can say that an uninterrupted mind would be a way to go about it. Being as clever and sophisticated as the audience obviously is, I will not go for a abjectly antipodal version to compare with that. Let's make it a bit more interesting. But as if that was interesting. All right. This will sound conflicting enough. I was going to try to keep from going from black to white and left to right. My God. All right, so here we have a method, an absolute method. You could not go wrong. I couldn't say anything any better. Nobody could to say, for those that understand at all, to hear what I'm saying, that a method without any superior method would be to be of uninterrupted mind. That's it. If you can do that long enough, you'll know everything. Everything will happen that's going to happen. But also, here would be another method, equally as useful, of similar value, not one bit of difference, but listen. And that would be to say, all right, well, how about the one I've used many times, don't stare. And don't stare, of course, when I do all this like that, is just an external reflection of what you should be doing mentally. And maybe I can improve it a little. It would be this. Break them up. That is, internally, never stare at one thought long enough to let the son of a bitch run its course. Catch them in mid-sentence. We're operating on the basis that you cannot find the trick yet, you cannot find the switch, assuming there is one, to cut off the playback, to cut off thought. But by God, you can do this, can't you? Surely you can. You can do this, can't you? There it is. Thought popped up and you're about to say something. You hear it start. Is look off. That is, break it off in mid-sentence. Jump. Continually interfere, breaking up every thought that starts. Again, assume we're operating on the basis you cannot find a way to shut them off. Of course, you're in that kind of conscious state to where you're not in trouble with it. All this is irrelevant. You just remember, a genuine bona fide traveler only shoots his feet when they're not moving. As long as they're moving, who cares? What's the problem? There is no mysticism. There is no way. There is no awakening. There is no enlightenment. Not when you're enlightened. Screw it. Forget it. That's one of the great benefits. It's the only time that a would-be mystic can stop running. That was a joke. Ha ha. It's embarrassing to say it's a joke and people still not laugh, and you have to. Break them up. Assume that you're in the position that thoughts continue to go. Is every time you catch one, here comes one, and it's too late. You either can stop them, you've either got them turned off, or you can't. The rest of the time, that you know what it is, it's a continuing series of brush fires, and you're out there, and each one and it's assuming you can't find who's setting the fires. In other words, you cannot bring about a steady state of non-incendiary activity around your feet. So it is a continual matter that there's one, you keep on. So here's the method. Again, you can't stop them. We're assuming you're in a position, just more or less an everyday position, and they start, rather than worry with them, rather than look at what they are, which you should know by now it's irrelevant what they are, except when you're looking at them, and then it is very relevant. Ooh, when am I thinking that again? Oh, but at any rate, assuming that you're not caught up in that we're just working on a very broad view, that there it is, it pops up. And it pops up before you know it. I mean, that's the way it is. If they're not cut off, they continue to pop up one after another. So it pops up and you're aware of it, but don't even fool with it in any manner whatsoever. Here's the only method to use according to the break them up method approach. The only one, you don't pay any attention to what it is, you give it no concern, no analyzation, no reflection, no musing, no ruminating, just whatever the hell it is, break it up in mid-sentence. And I'm saying mid-sentence, that is whenever you catch it. It pops up, and somebody's saying, well, and it's about to say something. You knew where it may be going, that they're about to say, oh, there's so-and-so that you know. Somebody owes you money or somebody you want to talk to. Whatever it is, it goes, oh, cut your eyes is what it amounts to. That's what the don't staring method represents, is you break off what is going on, of this continual in sync, this pulsation that's going on, thoughts, and you keep looking off. You don't ever stop. Can you see that it is not verbally, logically ill-founded to say that that is an opposite view of being of uninterrupted mind? That rather than being of uninterrupted mind, it's like you're trying to carry something and never lose sight of it, never lose balance of it, that no matter what else you do, you keep in mind this plate with this invisible something on it. Whatever you do, I'm just letting represent the uninterrupted mind. Whereas this other method it's like you have this empty plate and things keep appearing on it, thoughts. And every time they do, you go. All you got to do is shake it and it breaks them up. All you got to do is look off and then look back and there's no, and you look off and it's gone. It would be as though, I assume you get it, it would be as though if you're looking at your mind is talking to you, that your mind is sending out these sentences, these thoughts. If you look at it this way, every time it starts, all you got to do is look off and you quit listening. What in essence amounts to it is like you stick your fingers down in the sound. Or if you look at it as a radio, it's like you take the tuning and you go, bleh, or you hit the radio. The thing is, the thought gets mucked up. It gets broken up. Of course, it doesn't bother the mind. What the hell does that care? The thoughts, dime a dozen is just, it doesn't even come close. We got to redo the whole cliche. They're a trillion for nothing. So the mind doesn't care. You look off and, you broke up a thought. Didn't cost it anything. It's worth nothing. It doesn't even exist. No damage done. You look off. It was about to say something. It's like two people talking. Well, surely you get it, but it'd be like you and your mind talking, and your mind goes, oh, and you go, shut up. and you look off. So it stops. But as soon as you do that, and it goes, yeah, but shut up. Well, how about, shut up. Break them up. That is, you're breaking up the thought. You're breaking up the sentence. It is a non-staring. Now, does that not? Well, you do hear why I said that you can see that as sounding as though it is the antithesis of be of uninterrupted mind. We could call this, in fact, I was trying to come up with a name, break them up or don't stare mentally, but you could call it be of continual interrupted mind. That you willfully, you purposefully, which is the only way you can do it, because you will not do it without giving it your attention, without you doing it willfully, is that you purposefully interrupt it. That you're continually of interrupted mind by your own volition. Now what? There's opposites that can be, aren't there? Well, yeah. Under certain conditions. Do we have to go into that? Little lady in back says we should. If you think about it. How come that never has the effect I always dream of from reading Zen stories, that I'm going to say that some night and shout it, and suddenly hundreds or at least 2 or 3 people achieve enlightenment? That no matter what you say, no matter how you look at, set up things, that here's the way the mind looks at things, and that I can get people, or it can be described in another way, and you see that is not true. It's unbelievable that everyone, including me, normally believes that the mind looks at things that way and says it's that way when they're not. And you think, how can I keep doing that? And the answer is, well, you can't. Well, unless you think about it. Well, those 2 methods cannot be the same unless you think about it. But if you think about it, then they can't be the opposite. Well, unless you think about it. No, I'll make up a new fairy tale. There was once a kid. He was walking out the back door of his house, going out to play, and he suddenly looked around for some reason at a tree in his backyard in a certain way, and he suddenly thought, I'm enlightened. I understand what life's about. And he's just a kid. And he went, no, I don't. See, the last part was the joke, because he looked off and he started thinking. And then I said that he thought, no, I don't. But he didn't think that, because if he looked off and started thinking, then that's what he might have said, but it's not true. Let me do it again. A kid who'd heard about such thing was walking out the back door through the yard, just happened to turn around and looked at a basketball net. Maybe you didn't like the tree part. And suddenly he thought, I'm awake. I've achieved liberation. No, I hadn't. And he went on. The question is, if my acting was up to the quality of the script, the question is, if you're watching, I was trying to do a little dramatics, maybe I should exaggerate it. He's walking out in the yard, and he glances around a certain way at the side of the garage. Just the old side of the garage, but he's just walking by, and he looks around. He thinks, I've done it. I'm there. And he thought, no, I'm not. And he went on. I was supposed to represent, when he looked around at the old Buick parked in the backyard. See, I was supposed to represent, he went, that something extraordinary happened, that he was suddenly, just in the midst of everyday life, under everyday conditions, something un-everyday and unstandard seemed to have occurred inside the privacy of his head. And having heard the term somewhere, he thought, my God, I'm free. I'm awake. I'm enlightened. I'm liberated. This is a second look. And that's when he thought, no, I'm not. But see, when he got into that one, he didn't think, no, I'm not. Because then he was thinking. And he couldn't think, no, I'm not. And even if he did, it'd be meaningless. You want the second version? Walks out in the backyard, looks around, the eaves of the house, and thought, or felt, my God, I'm having the experience. And thought, yes, I am. Which version do you like? Which one is possible? Which school, if you'd been there in the village and you had your choice, an opportunity to go visit one of those schools, which one do you think would have become your fave? The one that gave the same lecture every day? Every day, every day, every day, every day. And I guess I do need that both the lectures, both the schools are giving lectures from people with equal understanding. That, to make it short, that the lectures, the information, the ideas, the method, whatever was said, well, let's say that the lectures were specifically on here is how it has been proven with some people. Of course, you know publicly, nobody goes through all that shit. They just say, here's how to awaken. But assuming it's based on something that had been used by people there, that it had a proven track record. Could have been something even known. Could have been something that people in the village knew. But you go up there, and there are people who are devoting their life to it, evidently, and you go up there, and there's an old wise mystic, apparently, and he comes out, and you may have heard what it was. Maybe he says, don't stare. And he expands it a little bit, let's say, but every day, the same guy or else somebody there in the monastery that seems to be in a position of worthy of being a spokesman, they come out at the appointed time every day, 7 days a week, year in, year out, as far back as memory goes, somebody comes out and says, for those of you who have heard the idea that of the mind being freed from the condition you feel it's in now, then that is what we're about up here. It's no secret. You all know that. I'm going to tell you how we go about it and how it has, what method we use that has proved successful now for many, many, many generations. And that is, friends, those who are interested and can hear this, what we do, what I have to say is, do not stare. That's all. Be careful. Be here again tomorrow if you want to show up. And you go, and every day it is that same thing. Would you end up there? You just got to assume whether don't stare strikes you as being of great interest. We're just having to, for the sake of playing fiction, you've got to assume that you were impressed enough, that one of the schools is just as impressive as another, and that you're very interested and that you have no reason on the surface, verbally, to question what's going on. It just, as I said, you may have even heard of the method before, but you go there and there it is, the old wise man, the man with the charisma, the guy in the position, and he says this, and you hear it from the mystic's mouth. Then you go over on the other mountaintop to the other school, and you go there in the same sort of physical milieu. The spokesman or spokespersons end up being as charismatic, as impressive, seem to be as knowledgeable and experienced as the first school. But you go there every day, and they say the same thing. If you're interested in what has always been described as the burst of freedom the absolute stable, unsullied, unruffled, calm, clear sky of another state of consciousness, the enlightenment, the awakening. If that's what you're interested in, that's what we are here doing. That's all any of us are here doing. That's our only intent, and that's what my lecture today will be about, is how to go about it. Not theory, not ideas, not preaching, not trying to convince you, no history. I'm going to tell you the kinds of methods we use that have worked. And every day, the lecture was slightly different. From one day to the next, it might be drastically different. And of course, there's only, if you went 50 years, some of it might sound similar. But you understand what I'm saying is that if they did have a written lecture every day, when it was read, it was thrown away. And nobody ever tried to rewrite that one. The subject, some part of what was covered might show back up next month, next year, 10 years later. But every day, it was basically, if you went every day, it presented something new from the day before, that here's what we do. That was like a non-ending series of little methods, little disciplines, not don't stare, not just one, but like a whole series, and they kept changing. And if you went there enough and you were alert enough, you were remembering things, you would hear one day that you'd think, ooh, I like that. And finally you'd think, wait a minute, that's just the opposite from what he said or one of the other monks said. Or say it was the same guy every day. You say, wait a minute, I remember specifically the one that I liked. I don't know, it was months ago or last year. And it was just the opposite from that. Which would you end up? Forget that last part, I didn't mean that as some sort of captious exemption or extraordinary condition. I didn't. Don't take that into account. It's just every day there was the same lecture at one, and the other day, and the lecture was about a specific method, remember. It's not just a lecture that's the same thing over and over that was history or theory or doctrine. It was a method. And all they did was say, here's what to do, and they told you the same goddamn thing every day. Don't stare, 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 don't stare. And you went to the other one, and every day it was something different. Don't look. The next day it was eat fast. The next day it was walk slow. The next day it was stay seated. The next day it was eat faster. The next day, wait a minute. The next day, and it went on like that. And not just words. I don't mean that they just gave it out. The guy, since it would be, for all you knew, that it was a brand new method. If it would say, eat slow, or don't stand up. You say, what the hell does that mean? So I don't mean that he just said, don't stand up in the same way the first school said, don't stare, and that was really all the lecture amounted to. At the other school, when they would say something new like, do not stand up. And you think, they didn't leave it at that. Then it went on for 30 or 40 minutes or an hour. There would be a lecture describing what the speaker meant about when he said our method today that we're going to discuss is do not stand up. So I don't mean that they just threw it out and left it to you. They discussed it. They described it. And so you had your choice. Where would you end up? Where would your mind want to end up? Where does your mind first say it should end up? Does your thinking right now tell you that one is intrinsically, has to be intrinsically more promising? I don't want to speak for anybody, but wouldn't we guess that many people's minds, if they were listening to this, and they were truly interested, and they thought, well, there are two schools, and as far as I know, they know what they're doing. Or anyway, that's all you had to go by. And you had to choose one and stay with it. And it was as important to your life as I'm pretending it is. And you thought, well, all right, you've got to choose one. They let you go for a reasonable length of time to either one, months. Take your time and go visit one another. But then the day finally comes. A few months later, you have to decide once and for all you're going to stick with one of them. And once you make your choice, you can't go to the other one. Would not your mind, presented with that conundrum or that question, would not your mind, wouldn't you agree, wouldn't you think most people's minds would choose the second school? The one that, even though every day it seems different, wouldn't it? Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't that, you suspect, be most people's choice? Would it not be your choice? Well, let's say they give you 6 months. So you go and you spend the time sort of equally divided. But you catch on very quick. It's no secret. You catch on at the first school, every day it's don't stare. Maybe a slight variation with the opening 2 or 3 minutes intro about what they're going to do, but then they say don't stare, and that's the day's lecture. And it's no secret. Maybe you ask around, yeah, that's what it is. And so then you're faced with the fact, all right, it's my intention, I'm going to keep on, I'm going to stay with this until I succeed, until I'm stuck with this. This is part of my life's activity from now on. And so after 6 months of going back and forth, and you catch on, well, if I pick school 1, then the rest of my life, I'll go there every day, assuming I want to. But if I do go there every day, if it's my intention to be exposed to it as best I can, to just be around people who may be more conscious, who may know what I'm after, who've had the experience, or may be in a better condition at the moment, then I'll certainly try to be there every day. But then you're faced with this, then every day I'm going to hear about a 3 or 4 minute lecture, and the only thing it's going to amount to is don't stare. I know that now, and I know it forever. Would you not think, well, what's the benefit? I know it already. I already got his lecture down. I already know school 1. I'm an expert on school 1's theory or method. It's don't stare. Why should I go back the rest of my life? Why should I go back one more time? I've been there. In the last 6 months, I've been there 400 times. Why should I go back? Whereas the other one, every day, what I've heard in the last 6 months, let's say I've been over there 300 or 400 times. I've heard 300 or 400 different or variations of methods. Not all of them made sense. Some of them I didn't understand what the hell they were talking about. Some of them seemed in conflict with some I heard a couple of weeks before. But at least there's a possibility of something new, right? The other school, I know what it is. I know what it is now. I know what it'll be 50 years from now. I'll be 50 years older going there and hearing the same thing. Only the mind. That was theatrics. Only the mind looks at that as being a choice. Poor old minds. Go to your room. I got tired of doing that.